Bill Dykes, welcome to Australian Musician and welcome back to Australia.
Yeah, well, thank you, Greg. Great to be here, really.
This is your third night, final night of the tour. How's it been going so far?
Very quick, very fast, and very nice. I have to say, I've really enjoyed it, and it's one of those things. I mean, it's such a beautiful country. I would love to say I've been able to see things and all, but that's not what this tour was about. It was about Godin guitars, and it was about the guitar players, and that has been worth the trip, I can tell you, in more ways than one. And the people that come out, you guys are like a bunch of Texas folks or something. Just really nice, great to be around. If I'm going to be away from home, away from my wife and kids and grandkids, I'd like to be somewhere I enjoy, and I'm enjoying this.
That's good to hear. Doyle, we know that your dad played guitar, so obviously guitar was a part of your life from very early on. But who was the first guitarist that you heard on a record or radio or TV that you really noticed?
Well, it's either, it would be one of three people, because my dad loved Chet Atkins, he loved Les Paul, and he loved Merle Travis. And I would say probably one of the first would have been Les Paul. Probably more, probably even before Chet, no. I woke up this morning feeling fine. I woke up with heaven on my mind. And that's what songs like that we would sing in church, and my dad would kick that off in the style of Les Paul. And he'd play his Les Paul Gold Tom. And so, I heard that, and growing up, that style, that flamboyancy. And not every church, you'd get by with that, but the kind of church we went to was very open and free. And I told Les one time, I went up a number of times to the Iridium and saw him and played with him. And I said, you went to church every Sunday with us. He said, well, I needed to be in church. And so he was a big influence on my playing too.
Yeah. You're known as a great fingerstyle guitarist. What was the first fingerstyle or fingerpicking exercise that you learned?
Well, that's a good, I'm glad you asked that, because it was really, a sailor had come to my church, and as after church, because we're from a port city also, Jacksonville, Florida, and so there were 3 Navy bases there, so we always had sailors coming in, whether they were there to worship God or whether they were there for the girls, so we didn't care, God or girls, or in this case, God, girls, and a guitar, and this guy could play, and he was playing this, I thought, my God. And I ran to my mother. She was in the back of the church talking to one of her friends, I said, can we have that sailor over for dinner, And about 3 days later, he came over and he showed me this. And it's a little pattern. But when you speed it up, see the thumb? So it's doing the Chet thing, and that was the way I learned. We just did a series of videos on the Godin site, and they're free, and people can learn that from that. But that was the first thing that really got my fingers to working, and in a uniform order too, where it sounded right, It was an ingenious thing. I don't know where he got it, even to this day. And we're good friends. I lost contact with him for over 30 years, and we're good friends. And I kind of got him back into play. I call him Barry the Sailor. And but anyway, that was it. That's what got me into it.
Did you start off with a thumb pick, or did you use a flat pick?
No, it was only until he came to our church. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I was trying to play chess. I just didn't know. Hey, I had all the licks. I could do that, but I was trying it with a flat pick. I didn't know anything about hybrid playing. I didn't know anything about finger picking, You just keeping it all together and going together. And it says, well, your thumb does this and your fingers do this, and your thumb is like the left hand of a piano player and the stride player. Right, well, try to get all that together at one time, you know. And that's what that little pattern that he showed me got my thumb being, you know, independent of my fingers, so to say, you know.
You've shared the stage with guitar legends like Les Paul and Chet Atkins and
Yeah.
Wayne Eddy. What do you learn from sharing a stage with guys like that?
They're just guys, you know, they're just guitar players, and they love it just like you do, just as much as you do. And that's what I loved about it. And another thing I loved about meeting my heroes, and it's not that way probably with every kind of an entertainer, but most guitar players are really great people. I mean, they're really good people, you know. I mean, I've met a few of them that maybe, you know, had a little bit of an attitude. I heard Duane Eddy say one time in defense of that, he says, well, son, I guess you got to have a little attitude to get out there and play for those folks in the first place. Some might have a little more than others, you know, and he just kind of smoothed it over really, really nice. Been around people like James Burton, being around someone like him, I tell you what, if you have an attitude, you better leave it at the door, because he's the most humbling man to be around. He's just the nicest, sweetest guy. Anybody with an attitude, they'd feel pretty silly around that. I'll tell you what, I never thought I'd be, my wife, you know, we've been married 43 years. She said, I thought you retired from the music business of that part, you know. And I said, well, I did too. I had 2 Olsen guitars. I was playing really great instruments. And a friend of mine that was with Taylor years ago was their artist relations guy, Bob Rabonis. He was here with us one time in Australia. He is now working with Godin. And he called me up. I was doing a tour in Texas, Christmas shows. And I'll never forget it. Grandpa Jones was an entertainer I used to play for years ago in the 70s, as a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame. His son was in the car with me, and we were talking about old times and Grandpa and just having a great time. And here's Bob Rabonis called me and said, you need to be playing Godin guitars. And Bob's got a very strong personality. I said, well, Bob, you know, I love you, man, but I got some pretty nice guitars in the car here, you know. And he kept insisting. And I said, well, he said, are you coming to NAMM? I said, well, I'm there for the organization, for NAMM. But I'm not there with any company representing anyone. But I'll come by and see you. And he wanted to send me some guitars. I said, no, I won't even be home till Christmas Day. And so NAMM's a couple of weeks after that. By the time I get my mother home, I'll be up there. And so and it seemed like everywhere I turned, there's a Godin guitar. I was in Austin, and one of my friends is also very close to Eric Johnson. He has several of Eric Johnson's guitars. He has Eric Clapton's guitars. He's a collector. He said, Doyle, you know the guitar I use the most? Not knowing nothing about the phone call I got from Bob a day or so before. He said, it's this little Godin right here. It was one just like this multi-act nylon string guitar back here. Very similar to this, but nylon string. He said, I play this more than any of these other guitars. And some of his guitars were worth tens of thousands of dollars, you know. And I sat down and I played, I said, okay, you're right, this is a great guitar. And so when I got to NAMM, Robert Godin had both hands up in the air. He says, we've been waiting on you for years. And I had a friend of mine who was a pastor, but is also a great guitar player. He said, well, I reckon they were expecting you. I said, all right, I guess. And we started playing some of their other guitars. I said, well, Daryl Owens is, where have we been? These guitars are great. And they're really perfect for the style that I play, and he plays the same style, very similar. They're perfect. I mean, and they're ingenious how he could marry electric and acoustic together, and you still get the dynamics, and walk out on the stage and you got this smaller, thin guitar. And it's not a $20,000 guitar, but it doesn't have to be, but it sounds like it. I mean, it's just amazing, remarkable instruments. And so the last thing he said, I want to take you around the world with Godin guitars, and I've been all over. I've been to China, I've been all over Europe, now I'm here just this year, so I'm enjoying it.
What are the main elements of a guitar that have to be just right for you to be able to play and love it?
Well, the dynamic part of it, I mean, electric guitars sound great, but then you have to have that acoustic quality for me to be able to get up and play, like How Great Thou Art or something like that. Starts off, kind of more jazzy, but at the end, you're doing, and I turned it down, and I'm actually doing timpani. It's not even guitar stuff. It's piano stuff and it's orchestral stuff. And I'm not thinking I have 6 strings here. I'm thinking I have an orchestra, and you're not even thinking about any of that. You're just trying to get out of here into here. And so I think that's one of the things that it has to have that. It has to be able to take those dynamics too, and not fold up and under. It has to have a bit of moxie to it, I think.
There are guitar players who like a nice set of bright strings when they play, and there are guitar players who like to wear them in a little bit. Yeah. Where do you sit?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, especially if you're recording, I just changed the strings on this guitar, but isn't even, I didn't even bring a guitar to Australia, so I've been playing their guitars here, and it's like going to a music store and playing all their guitars, so I'm having fun. But the consistency of these guitars is the reason I can do that, And so, I mean, I like to have strings that stay in tune. That's the most important thing. The tone, I really do like it if it's been on a day or so. I like the tone of the guitar, especially if you're recording. You don't want it too bright. If I'm recording, it depends on how much I play the guitar before I actually go into the studio. But I would change the day before usually.
Yeah. Your relationship with electric guitars, do you have moments periods where you just feel like playing electric?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have a lot of guitars. I have some old Telecasters out of the 50s and 60s, and some old Gretsches out of the 50s and 60s, and newer guitars like that. And I really enjoy playing electrics, But then you see some of these guitars that they've come up with in the Montreal, and they're a little different with Godin. And so you have a guitar that it feels kind of, if I can use other guitars, it's more like a jazz guitar, but it's like a 335 too. You know what I mean? It marries them together, but you get a little more acoustic quality than you do out of a 335. And it's the way they put their guitars together. It's just brilliant. I mean, with the solid tops and the whole thing. Yeah, I love old guitars, L5s and all that kind of stuff. But I also like a guitar that's easy to hold and easy to play. I got some old Les Pauls and things like that too that I enjoy playing. It's fun to play those old guitars, But when you're out on stage, it's kind of like Bob Taylor told me this a long time ago. He saw this kid up on stage with an old Gibson of some kind. He loved that guitar, but it wouldn't stay in tune for some reason. And he says, it's one thing to have a guitar like that. And I love old guitars. They're fun to play. But he says, I love old cars, You're not going to take your 57 Chevy. It's nice to drive around town, but you're not going to drive it to Perth, You're going to take a new car or a van or something that works, that's more reliable, and it does the job better. And that's the way guitars are too. And that's one thing I really like about these. They're more practical and they're very versatile. They're a lot more versatile than one guitar. And some of these guitars are like 2 or 3 guitars in one. That's amazing to me. We had that conversation today, actually. It's very important. And I'll have to say, I've been around manufacturers. I've been around big business. I'm just a guitar player, but I hear what goes on, you know what I mean, at the tables and what they're talking about. And there are a lot of manufacturers that just soon go direct. You know, a lot of manufacturers would just soon bypass the stores. You know, I've heard them talk about things like that. You won't hear that out of Robert Godin. And that's one reason I love these guys, and that's why I'm out here. There's a lot of other companies that says we don't need people in music stores anymore. You know, I've heard that. And no, I think it's not only are they the bright spot in a community, to me, to see a music store, especially if you have kids going there taking lessons. That's one of the most beautiful things in this country, you know, your country or my country or whatever, is to see that. And so it's life. There's life for people going in, but they're also fulfilling their dreams to learn how to play an instrument and also to invest. There's a guy, my dad passed away 8 years ago last week, and one of my cousin's husbands were real close to my dad, and he told me the first time he really had an encounter with Bubba. Everybody called him Bubba. And he said, now what should I buy my son? He wanted to help him so he went down to the music store, and he's figuring he's going to spend $150, $200. And he spent several times that. And he says, don't you buy him some cheap guitar, because my dad knew the guy had money. And he said, you invest in that boy, and he'll learn how to play. And he did that for me. And it was the same music store. And Fred Paulus down in Jacksonville, Florida, I'll never forget. My first guitar was a Silvertone, you know, and it came from Sears and Roebuck. But Mom and Dad had to find out, because I took 2 years of piano, they had to know whether I was really serious about it. And the key busted, and I would have to borrow my dad's pliers and tune it, you know. I was walking home from school, and my dad saw me walking and said, son, get in the car, I have your guitar fixed up for you. And went downtown to Mr. Paula's store, you know. And for the first time, I've been in there with my dad before, but for the first time, I loved guitars by that time. And I looked around, and I thought, I've never seen anything like this. And the beautiful guitars, and they were 335s, and they were the old Voxes, you know, the pear-shaped ones, and the Fenders. And yeah, I still remember the smell of that store. I remember the amplifiers. And so he said, well, you look around, son, and I'm going to talk to Mr. Paulus for a minute. And they both called me over, and I went over and expected to see my little Silvertone with a repaired key. And they opened up this case, and it was a brand new Gibson J45 flat top guitar, you know. And so my dad didn't just practice what he preached what he practiced, you know, and I think there's a difference there, you know. He'd already done that, and he did it with me and my brother also. And so I encourage people to invest, and they're not going to know how to do that unless there's a music store. Someone that doesn't know how to buy something for their son or their daughter, they couldn't go to Bubba and my dad and say, let's go down to the music store. If they're just online, what are they going to do? Just read somebody's opinion about it, or go down there and actually listen to it and play it? And that's a big deal, and it's still a big deal, and it will always be a big deal.
So, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Greg.